I want to start off this video by apologizing. I'm very stuffy. I have a little cold that I'm getting over. It's no big deal. Don't feel sorry for me. Because we're here today to talk about a foldable phone that costs $10.99. The Tecno Phantom V2 is a foldable phone for $10.99, which is an insane price when you consider the price points of all the other foldables that are currently on the market. Now look, it's not perfect. There's a lot of things I don't like about this phone, which we'll get to, but I want to give you guys some context. I'm going to be comparing it to a lot of other devices to kind of see what you get at the high end, but also what this price point delivers. Now, all these phones on the table will give you an idea of what the design language is from all these companies. If you look at the foldables on the right-hand side, they're a little bit more skinny, right? And then if you look at the phones on the left-hand side, they're wider. The Honor all the way to the Pixel 9 Pro Fold use a standard aspect ratio, one that you're used to using on a normal phone. The Phantom and the Z Fold 6 are very skinny devices. Like if you like holding a remote control in your hand, then that's how these two phones feel. Now the good news though is that the Phantom V2 is still a bit wider. The Z Fold 6 front display is not a lot of fun to type on. The Phantom, on the other hand, as skinny as it is more comfortable to type on. Like I didn't feel like my fingers were suffering. Also, the design language is very different between all of these devices. They all feel generally premium, but some corners were cut on the Phantom. The edges are nice and round. It has a 12mm thickness, so very similar to the Z Fold 6. Even the hinge mechanism looks almost identical. This was obviously designed in collaboration with a fashion brand called Loewe. I've never heard of them until I got this phone, but if that's your thing, it's part of this device. The camera bump is in the middle, which I prefer because it means the phone is not going to shake everywhere on the table, whereas the Z Fold 6 is bouncing like a trampoline. The other thing to take into consideration is the IP certification. For example, the Pixel 9 Pro Fold is IPX8, so it's not rated for dust, but it is water resistant. The Phantom is IP54, which means it's pretty good at repelling dust, but it's not so great when it comes to water. Like it can take some splashes, but this phone by any means is not water resistant. The other thing I truly like is these fake faux leather backings that the companies are putting on their phones. One, you don't see fingerprints. Two, it mentally makes me feel like I don't need a case, because like this, if it scratches, it will probably add to the look. And on top of that, there's just a lot more grip when you use this faux leather backing compared to a glossy glass back. Other things to take into consideration is I love how they made a little indent for the fingerprint scanner. This is nice because like when I'm holding the phone, my finger knows exactly where to go. Whereas sometimes on the Z Fold or the Pixel, it's hard to tell between the volume rocker and the button until you get super used to it. This has the indent, so my thumb naturally goes right into it. Now the fingerprint speed is not bad. You know, it's consistent. Like there's not one time I felt that it was not working, but it's obviously not as fast as the fingerprint scanner on the Galaxy phone. Front display being 6.42 inches comes pre-installed with a screen protector. I still have it on. The front camera is 32 megapixels. It actually takes pretty good photos. I was quite shocked and very pleased with the results. The only thing it doesn't do is shoot 4K video. It tops out at 1080p. All right, so now you're looking at the front-facing cameras on both of these devices. The Phantom only has a 1080p webcam. It can only do 1080p up to 60 frames per second, whereas the Google Pixel 9 Pro Fold is doing a full 4K 30. You guys let me know how the image looks, and most importantly, how do the microphones sound? So as you can see here, it does support Dolby Atmos. You have your SIM card tray, which can hold up to 2 SIMs. It doesn't support eSIM, which is kind of disappointing for me because I like to have one physical SIM and then an eSIM capability so that when I go to another country, I can have my eSIM ready to go instead of having to buy a physical SIM in the country that I land in. But the sound quality is quite good. I did a little comparison to the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, and you guys let me know which one sounds better. Now, the one area where it feels a little bit less premium is the hinge. Like, it's not a bad hinge, it's just not as sturdy and controllable like the one on the Z Fold 6. Like, for example, if I open it up, you can get it to about halfway, right? Like you really have to push it to get to about halfway. But as soon as you pass that like halfway mark, you can't go anywhere else. It completely flops back. Now this is obviously not the biggest deal, but I do want to point it out. Now there's one thing you need to know. This phone is always warm, like always. You're installing an application, it gets hot. You are just browsing the internet, it gets hot. If you live in a hot country, this is kind of a concern, considering the Tecno brand in general is very popular in the continent of Africa. This might be something to take into consideration. Also, the software experience, it's fine, like it's using high OS. It's not the most beautiful skin, but it's fine. I don't like this shelf. Sometimes the shelf is also slow to load. Maybe it's the MediaTek Dimensity 9000 Plus processor inside of here. This processor is nowhere near as fast as the Tensor G4, and it's not even close to the speed of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. And that brings me to the question of how will this phone be in 2 to 3 years? Because I'm already noticing a little bit of micro lag when I'm opening and closing things. Playing games on this is also very slow. Like after 2 years, is this gonna be unusable? Is Tecno going to be updating it with more than 1 or 2 Android updates? I really hope they do, because this thing costs $1,100. But if you're a complete power user, you will know that this does come with the ability to be used with a stylus. You can purchase the Phantom V pen and it works perfectly with this phone. Now this pen is a nice pen, like it feels great to use, and it can be used on the big inner display. The pen does not work with the front display, only the inner one. Now the latency is good enough because both panels are 120 Hertz, but it doesn't feel as fluid as the S Pen on the Z Fold 6. You can also go into the settings and there's a little section called the folding screen zone that allows you to customize your multitasking experience. For example, if you want to do split screen apps like you can do on most foldable devices, you can absolutely do that. You want to have floating windows? You can absolutely do that as well. And there's also the ability to use compatibility mode if you want your apps to resize in a certain way. As for battery life, it's not bad at all. It's not the best, but it's acceptable. Like 5 hours of screen on time is what I was averaging. I would end the day with like 40 to 50%, but you think with a 5750 milliamp hour battery that's inside of here, you would get a little more. The displays are interesting though, because on the front 6.42 inch Full HD Plus AMOLED display, the peak brightness is 1600 nits. Now there's obviously foldable phones with brighter displays, but 1600 nits of peak brightness is acceptable for outdoor use. Now you're not going to see 1600 nits outdoors all the time. This is mostly when you're playing HDR content, but it means the front display can handle bright light just fine. The inner display, being 7.85 inches, is a little bit more pixel dense. It's a 2K plus AMOLED display, but the peak brightness is only 900 nits. That pales in comparison to the 2000 plus peak brightness you'd get on the Pixel 9 Pro, the OnePlus Open, or the Z Fold 6. I understand this is a cheaper foldable phone, but they're starting to sacrifice in too many areas. This is a glossy panel. It doesn't use the matte display of the Honor Magic V3 or the OnePlus Open. The crease is just as noticeable as all the other foldable phones. If you're staring at it directly on, you most likely won't see it, but obviously if you place it in different angles, it will pop up. The internal 32 megapixel camera is also very good. It blows the 4 megapixel Z Fold 6 right out of the water. Now, I know some of you hate when I talk about the inner display. I get it. Most of the time we're going to be using the rear cameras because we can use the front display to actually see ourselves. But there are times when you're working on the phone and you're having a conference call that you need to use the bigger inner display and the camera to go along with it. Now, the one area I was absolutely convinced they were gonna nerf was the cameras. The back of this phone has 3 cameras, 3 50 megapixel cameras, a telephoto, an ultra wide, and a regular wide. And I was actually kind of shocked. I compared it to the Pixel 9 Pro Fold for context, and it kept up. It wasn't as consistent as the Pixel, but during the day, just like most phones these days, it took very good photos. Were they always crystal clear and sharp? No. Were there times where the dynamic range wasn't as good as the dynamic range on the Pixel 9? Yes, but they were very acceptable. Like, I wasn't disappointed with the pictures at all. Now, unfortunately, this phone can only zoom up to 2 times optically. I was expecting a bit more for a 50 megapixel sensor, which pales in comparison to the 3 or the 5 that you find on the Pixel 9 Pro Fold. It also can zoom digitally up to 20 times, and it looks fine. Like, I'm not angry at it, but again, super res zoom on the Pixel 9 Pro Fold just looks significantly better. Nighttime photography is where things got good and weird. Like, it takes good photos at night, but they look a little bit oversaturated. And because of that, you sometimes get this smudging effect or an oil painting effect. And I know what Tecno's trying to do. They're trying to boost up the saturation in order to make the images look more pleasing. And most of the time, the pictures taken at night look great. They actually perform very comparable to the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, but then there were times where they just fell apart, where things were a bit too smudgy or smudged or over boosted, and it would just ruin the image of the photo that you were taking. But the 4K video surprised me. It looks pretty good. You know, again, I'm comparing it to the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, which doesn't have the best video, but it actually beats it out. I personally think the colors look more appealing right out of the camera than what the Pixel is producing. Sure, the Pixel has slightly better image or object image stabilization, but I actually kind of prefer the 4K video on the Tecno. So here's the thing. I like this phone a lot. For $1099, it's not a bad product, but I have a couple of concerns. I truly feel like they should have went with last year's Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. Not only would that enable the performance to be better for years to come, I feel like it would just do a tiny bit better of a job making the phone feel cooler. The MediaTek processor inside of here feels okay today, but the fact that I'm already noticing micro lag is kind of a concern. Like, how is this going to feel 2 to 3 years later? Also, I don't know Tecno's update record. Are they going to support this phone 2 or 3 years down the road? I'm dropping $1,100 on this. They absolutely better, because this is a big investment. I think it's a good first start. The price is exceptional, but I feel like if you're dropping that kind of money, you're better off paying $12.99 and buying the OnePlus Open instead. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.